It started with a sound so small most people would have missed it. A single, steady beep echoing through the hospital room. But for me, that simple tone was the loudest, most beautiful thing I'd ever heard. 3 weeks of absolute silence had taught me what loneliness really sounded like. When the heart monitor came alive beside me, it wasn't just marking my pulse. It was marking the return of my world. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. Doctor. Patel's lips moved before I realized I could actually hear her. Mr. Brooks, can you hear me now? Her voice was clear, precise, a melody I never thought I'd hear again. I didn't speak right away. I was afraid that if I tried, the fragile miracle would vanish. Like breath on winter glass. I pressed a trembling hand to my chest. My heartbeat matched the rhythm of the machine. I could hear it. I could feel it. She smiled, making notes on her tablet. The faint scratch of the stylus startled me. I'd forgotten how sharp silence could make every tiny sound. Your hearing is back to normal, she said gently. All frequencies. You're very lucky, Mr. Brooks. Lucky. I'd heard that word too often these past months, after my wife died, after the accident at the skating rink that stole my hearing. But this time, the word felt heavier. Richa. I wasn't lucky. I was reborn. When they finally discharged me from Foothills Medical Center, I didn't rush home. Instead, I stopped at Prince's Island Park. Early spring in Calgary still carried a bite of cold. But the ice on the Bow River was melting, and the air was alive with sound, the hiss of wind through birches, the distant laughter of skaters, the low honk of geese cutting across the sky. I closed my eyes and let the noise wash over me. 3 weeks without sound had shown me more about people than 60 years of hearing ever had. In silence, you learn to watch the way faces tighten when they think you don't understand, how sympathy sometimes hides impatience. My daughter Lily had moved into my house during my recovery, her boyfriend Noah helping out when his real estate ventures allowed. They'd been kind, at least. That's what I'd believed. Now, sitting by the frozen river, I wondered what they'd said in those quiet rooms while I nodded and smiled, unable to respond. I wondered if silence had turned me invisible. I should have called them to share the news, told Lily, her old man could hear again. But something inside me, an engineer's instinct maybe, whispered, wait. Before you rebuild, inspect the foundation. So I didn't call. I sat under the gray Canadian sky, listening to the city hum back to life around me, and promised myself one thing. I'd go home as if nothing had changed. I'd keep the silence alive a little longer, not because I was afraid, but because I needed to know. And as the wind carried the sound of church bells across the water, I realized I wasn't returning home to celebrate my miracle. I was returning to test it. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the late afternoon light had turned the snow into liquid gold. From the outside, the house looked exactly as I'd left it, the maple tree in the yard still bare. The curtains Lily had insisted on changing, still drawn halfway. But as I sat in the car, engine humming softly, I felt the weight of that whisper I'd heard in the park, inspect the foundation before you rebuild. I stepped out carefully, adjusting the scarf around my neck. The cold Calgary air bit at my face, but it felt honest, more honest than the smiles I was about to see. Inside, the house was warm, almost too warm. Lily's laughter floated from the kitchen, bright and practiced. Dad, you're home early, she said, appearing with that sweet, over-animated expression she used whenever she wanted to seem cheerful. Noah followed behind her, carrying a stack of grocery bags, his grin polite but distant. I tapped my ear and shrugged, pretending confusion. It was the role I'd chosen, the man still half trapped in silence. Lily's smile widened, her voice instantly louder. "Can you hear me?" "Dad!" she shouted, as though volume could substitute for love. I nodded slowly, then gestured to the counter, miming that I'd help with the bags. She waved her hands quickly. "No, no, you sit. You should rest. Doctor Patel said you still need to be careful." "Right." Her tone was sugary, but there was an edge beneath it. Something rehearsed. I sat at the table, hands folded. From where I was, I could see the small notepad she kept on the counter for writing me messages. It had become her favorite prop these past weeks. Today's page, read in neat blue ink, dinner at 6. Don't forget your pills. The kind of note that looked caring at first glance, but to me, it now looked like a script. Noah unpacked the groceries in silence, checking his phone between each bag. When he caught me watching, he gave a quick smile. "Big day tomorrow," he said loudly, exaggerating his lips so I could read them. "Inspection." Inspection, I tilted my head, pretending curiosity, but he waved it off. "Nothing important. Just home stuff." "Home stuff." I nodded as if satisfied, but something inside me shifted. 3 weeks ago, I'd have believed him. Now, every word sounded like a test. As Lily cooked, I studied the kitchen, my wife's ceramic teapot, the one she'd bought in Banff years ago, had been moved to a lower shelf, replaced by one of those sleek chrome gadgets Lily liked. The family photos on the wall were rearranged. To Margaret's picture, once at the center, had been pushed to the edge. Little changes, subtle ones, but together they spoke volumes. When dinner was ready, Lily placed a bowl of soup in front of me, patting my shoulder. "You're getting stronger." "Dad," she said, her voice soft but distant. "We'll take good care of you." I nodded, spoon halfway to my lips, and smiled, the way grateful men are supposed to smile. But behind my calm expression, the engineer in me was already sketching blueprints for truth, not buildings. Because as I listened to the rhythm of their footsteps and the careful choreography of their words, one thing became painfully clear. This house wasn't my home anymore. It was a stage, and the show had only just begun. That night, after Lily and Noah had gone upstairs, the house settled into its usual winter quiet, the hum of the furnace, the soft creak of wood contracting in the cold. But to me, every sound felt magnified, like the house itself was trying to speak. I stayed downstairs, pretending to read the same page of an old engineering journal over and over, the words swimming uselessly in front of me. My mind was elsewhere, on Noah's careless mention of an inspection, on the rearranged photographs, on the way Lily's smile never quite reached her eyes. When the clock on the mantel chimed 10, I stood and turned off the lights. I didn't go to bed. Instead, I climbed the stairs halfway and stopped by the railing that overlooked the open foyer. From there, I could see the faint glow under their door, could hear the muffled rhythm of voices. The acoustics in this old house had always fascinated me. I'd designed the renovations myself 15 years ago, added the skylight, widened the stairwell, improved ventilation. I remembered joking to Margaret that sound traveled so well here. We'd never keep a secret. I hadn't realized then how prophetic that joke would be. At first, their words blurred, fragments of sentences, bits of laughter. Then Noah's voice came through more clearly. "If we list it before spring, we'll get the best price. The market's good right now." My pulse quickened. List it. Lily's reply was soft but sharp. We can't list anything until we deal with Dad. The assessor comes next week. After that, we'll have documentation for Maple Ridge. I gripped the banister until my knuckles ached. Maple Ridge. The name sounded familiar. It took me a moment to remember the brochure Lily had left on the coffee table weeks ago, claiming it was for research, a senior care facility. I stayed completely still, barely breathing. Noah chuckled. He won't resist much. He still thinks you're his sweet, helpful daughter. The man can't even hear us talking about it. A long pause followed. Then Lily's voice. Get her now. Uncertain. He's been different lately, watching more. It's like he's waiting for something. He's harmless, Noah said dismissively. You said it yourself. He just sits there smiling. By summer, we'll be in Vancouver with enough for a down payment. The floor beneath me felt unsteady, as though the beams I'd once measured myself had begun to rot. I wanted to rush in, shout, confront. But years of managing construction sites had taught me the value of patience. You don't demolish before you've studied the structure. I backed away slowly, avoiding the familiar creak in the third step, and slipped into my bedroom. The faint smell of Margaret's lavender candle lingered on the nightstand. I sat on the edge of the bed and pressed a shaking hand over my chest. So that was the truth. Their care, their kindness, the soup and smiles, all part of a plan built on greed. For a long time, I just listened to the silence. Then I reached for my old leather notebook from the drawer. If they were turning my home into a blueprint for betrayal, then I would draw one of my own, precise, quiet, and unbreakable. Before blowing out the candle, I looked toward the ceiling, where the faint hum of their laughter still echoed through the vent. You're right, Noah, I whispered. I am waiting for something. And I was. Waiting for the perfect moment to make sure the next sound they heard from me would change everything. I hardly slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the blueprint of my own house, the place I designed with pride, now turned into a cage of deceit. Lily's voice replayed in my head like a broken radio. The assessor comes next week. That phrase became a pulse. A warning. By dawn, I was fully awake, sitting at my desk in the study where Margaret and I had once balanced bills and planned vacations we never took. The early light filtered through the frosted window, tinting the room with a cold silver hue. I opened my notebook, the same one I'd used when designing the house renovations years ago. Only this time, I wasn't sketching walls or beams. I was sketching justice. The first rule of engineering is simple. Never act on emotion. Act on evidence. So, I began to build my case the way I used to build a bridge, layer by layer. Foundation first. Documentation. I unlocked my tablet and started saving every message Lily had ever sent about my care, each one dripping with forced affection. I even found an email draft she'd left open the night before, half written to a realtor titled Potential Property Listing, Maple Drive. My heart thudded once. Heavy and final. R. Witnesses. There was Dr. Singh, my family doctor of 10 years, who still called me professor because I used to explain my lab results like equations, and Mrs. O'Hara, my neighbor, who visited often with her corgi and gossip from down the street. Both could vouch for my state of mind, and, more importantly, my sanity. Sen. Legal counsel. I reached for my old contact list, flipping to see. Claire Beaumont, attorney. Friend of Margaret's cousin. The woman who'd handled our will years ago. I hadn't spoken to her since the funeral. My hand trembled slightly as I dialed her number. She answered on the second ring, her tone brisk, yet warm. Mr. Brooks, it's been a while. Call me Aiden. Please, I said. And yes, it has. I'm afraid this isn't a social call. Within an hour, I was in her downtown office. The kind of place that smelled faintly of paper, coffee, and quiet power. Claire listened without interrupting as I laid out everything: the hearing loss, the recovery, the overheard conversation. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair, eyes sharp. You've got more composure than most men would in your situation, she said finally. We'll make this right, but you'll need to stay quiet for a few more days. Let them think they're winning. I nodded slowly. That's exactly what I planned. We spent the next hour drafting documents and updated will, transferring everything to my son Mason. A revocation of any previous medical powers of attorney, and a notarized statement affirming my current mental and physical clarity. Claire would file them that afternoon. When I stepped back out into the cold Calgary air, I felt lighter, not happy, not yet, but steady, focused. As I drove home, snow began to fall in slow, deliberate flakes, coating the streets in white silence. It reminded me of those 3 deaf weeks, only this time, the quiet belonged to me. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw Lily's car already parked. The house glowed warmly from the kitchen windows, like a scene from a life I no longer recognized. I shut off the engine and sat there for a moment, watching the breath cloud up in front of me. Claire's last words echoed in my head. Let them think they're winning. I smiled faintly, gripping the steering wheel. They were about to learn that silence could be the sharpest sound of all. When I opened the front door, the scent of cinnamon drifted through the hallway, Lily's favorite trick to make the house feel inviting. I'd once found it comforting. Now it smelled like deceit disguised as warmth. Dad, she called from the kitchen. You're home early. We were just talking about dinner plans. I stepped inside, wiping snow from my coat. My heart beat steadily, not from fear, but from control. Claire's words still echoed in my mind. Let them think they're winning. Lily hurried toward me, her expression bright, her hands fluttering with exaggerated concern. Did you get your prescriptions filled? Do you need me to? I raised a hand, smiling faintly, and pointed at my ear as if still uncertain. The act had become second nature now, a costume of confusion I wore perfectly. She nodded sympathetically, lowering her voice to that rehearsed tone of care. Why don't you rest? Dad, Noah, and I have everything handled. I nodded and shuffled toward the living room, feeling her eyes follow me the entire way. My notebook was hidden in my jacket pocket, filled with every detail, times, dates, overheard conversations, and her little slips of truth. When I sat in my recliner, I noticed something new. On the dining table, beside a stack of mail, lay a glossy folder with the words, Maple Ridge Care, transition made easy. My chest tightened, but outwardly I stayed calm, flipping through a magazine as if nothing had changed. Their voices carried faintly from the kitchen. Dr. Henderson confirmed for Friday. Noah said, he'll do the evaluation here. Says, it's easier that way. Good, Lily answered. Once that's done, we can move forward with the realtor. I'll say Dad's been forgetful lately, leaving the stove on. Misplacing things. I could hear her tone shift from nervousness to satisfaction. After all this time, we deserve a fresh start. I set the magazine down, my fingers tightening around its edge. A fresh start. Yes, that's what they would get, just not the one they imagined. At that moment, the doorbell rang. Lily hurried to answer it, and her polite voice floated through the hall. Mrs. O'Hara, what a nice surprise. I smiled to myself. Perfect timing. My neighbor appeared in the doorway, her red scarf dusted with snow, her corgi trotting at her feet. Just stopped by to check on you. Aiden. Haven't seen you outside lately. I looked up and gave her a small wave. Just taking it easy, I said clearly, enunciating every word. Lily froze. Her face twitched almost imperceptibly. She hadn't expected me to respond so naturally. Mrs. O'Hara chuckled. You sound great. Guess those hearing treatments worked wonders. For a moment, silence stretched across the room like a wire pulled tight. Lily's hands twisted around the edge of the folder. Her smile brittle. They're helping. She managed, her voice too bright. Noah appeared behind her, his jaw tense. He shot her a look that said everything. Mrs. O'Hara, oblivious to the tension, settled into the couch, chatting about her grandson's hockey tournament. But I caught every flicker of Lily's expression, the calculation, the panic buried beneath her practiced kindness. When Mrs. O'Hara finally stood to leave, she patted my shoulder warmly. You're lucky to have such caring family. Aiden. Lily forced a laugh. Yes, he is. After the door closed, the silence returned, but it wasn't comforting anymore. It was the kind that trembles right before something breaks. Noah was the first to speak, his voice low, almost a growl. He answered her. Perfectly. You said he couldn't. Lily's reply was barely a whisper. He couldn't. He shouldn't. I stood slowly. My smile, polite, but deliberate. I think I'll head upstairs now, I said. Their heads snapped toward me, eyes wide. I let the words hang in the air, clear. Strong. Undeniable. Then I turned and climbed the stairs, leaving them in the ruins of their performance. For the first time, it was their silence that filled the house, and mine that felt like power. Their shocked faces stayed burned in my mind long after I reached the top of the stairs. For weeks, I'd been the silent one, the fool they thought they could manipulate. Now, the balance had shifted. Their silence filled the house uneasy, brittle, and afraid. I closed my bedroom door behind me and leaned against it. Heart steady, breath even. The first phase of my plan was complete. They were starting to suspect, but suspicion wasn't proof. Not yet. I needed them to expose themselves completely. The next morning, the house was quieter than usual. No cheerful greetings. No performative small talk. Even the cinnamon candle had gone out. I could feel their unease lingering like smoke. At breakfast, Lily barely met my eyes. Morning. Dad, she said, voice too light, too careful. Noah sat across from me, stirring his coffee until it turned cold. I let the moment stretch, sipping mine calmly, enjoying the soft clink of the spoon against porcelain. It was almost poetic, the sound of composure unnerving the guilty. Afterward, I returned to my study, pretending to organize paperwork. In truth, I was waiting. Claire had called earlier to confirm everything was ready, the new will filed, the revocation of power of attorney completed, and the notarized proof of mental competence signed by both Dr. Singh and Mrs. O'Hara, who had graciously volunteered as witnesses. At exactly 10 o'clock, a car door slammed outside. Through the window, I saw a man in a navy coat carrying a clipboard, Dr. Henderson, the so-called assessor. Right behind him were Lily and Noah, walking fast, whispering urgently. I stayed seated as they entered. Dad Lily's voice cracked with false cheer. We have a quick visit today. Dr. Henderson's just here to check how you're doing. Routine. Really? I smiled politely. Of course, I said evenly. Come in. The doctor blinked, surprised. Good morning, Mr. Brooks. I wasn't aware you could hear this. Well, oh, I said, for quite some time now. The words hit like thunder. Lily's smile froze. Noach Balad. I stood, facing them calmly, the late morning sun pouring across the carpet like a spotlight. Please, I continued, have a seat. I believe my attorney is on her way. As if on cue, the doorbell rang. Claire Beaumont stepped inside, her coat dusted with snow, a leather folder tucked under her arm. Good morning, she said, her tone crisp but polite. I'm here regarding a legal matter concerning Mr. Selm, Brooks's personal affairs. Lily's voice broke. Dad, what's going on? Claire placed the folder on the table and opened it. This, she said, is the updated will, power of attorney, and a signed medical evaluation confirming full cognitive function. Any attempt to declare Mr. Brooks incompetent will be considered fraud. I'd advise you both to tread carefully. Noah tried to speak, but no words came out. Lily's face crumpled, the mask of control collapsing into panic. Dad, please. We were just planning my disappearance, I interrupted quietly. Selling the home where your mother died, calculating the profit while I sat here smiling, pretending not to hear. Tears gathered in her eyes. I didn't mean. Yes, you did, I said, my voice steady, every word, every number. You meant all of it. Claire closed the folder and met my gaze. Would you like me to escort them out? Aiden, I looked at my daughter, the woman I'd once carried on my shoulders through this same doorway, now standing there small and dishonest. No, I said. They know the way. Lily's sobs filled the hallway as she and Noah stumbled toward the door. The sound didn't hurt anymore. It only confirmed what I already knew, that silence wasn't the enemy. Deception was. When the door finally shut behind them, the house exhaled. For the first time in months, the air felt clean. I stood by the window, watching the snow fall gently across the yard, and whispered to the empty room, this time, the silence is mine. When the door closed behind Lily and Noah, the sound seemed to linger, a hollow click that marked the end of something far larger than their presence. I stood still for a long moment, my reflection faint in the window, framed by falling snow. The house, once heavy with deceit, now felt weightless, as though it had finally exhaled after holding its breath for weeks. Claire gathered her papers in quiet efficiency. It's done, she said softly. They won't come back. I'll make sure everything is documented. I nodded. Thank you, Claire, for helping me reclaim my life. She smiled. Not the polite kind lawyers give their clients, but something genuine. You didn't need me to reclaim it. Aiden, you just needed to stop apologizing for keeping it. When she left, I wandered through the house in silence. A different kind of silence this time. One I chose. The air felt clearer, the light brighter. Even the ticking clock in the living room seemed to beat with a calmer rhythm, steady and alive. I passed the kitchen table where Margaret and I once shared coffee every morning. Her chair was still there, polished and untouched. For the first time since her death, I sat across from that empty seat and didn't feel the ache of loss, only gratitude. Gratitude for the lessons her absence had forced me to learn. In the afternoon, I called Mason. He picked up on the first ring. Dad, it's over, I said simply. They're gone. He exhaled audibly. the sound full of both relief and sorrow. I can't believe she went that far. She did what she thought she could get away with, I replied. But I think she learned something today, that silence doesn't mean weakness. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Mason said quietly, "I'm proud of you. Dad, Mom would be, too." That sentence loosened something in me, a tension I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. "Thank you. Son, bring the kids up when the snow melts. I'll show them where their grandmother planted her roses." After we hung up, I went outside. The sun had begun to set, painting the snowdrifts in soft shades of amber and rose. I stood by the maple tree in the yard, the one Lily used to climb when she was little, when laughter was still easy between us. Maybe, one day, time would find a way to soften what had hardened in her heart. Maybe forgiveness would come, not because she deserved it, but because I did. Back inside, I lit the old fireplace and warmed a bowl of soup, the simple kind Margaret used to make on cold nights. As I ate, the flames flickered gently across the framed photos on the mantel. I noticed one I hadn't moved yet, a picture of Lily at her high school graduation, her smile radiant, unspoiled. I didn't take it down. Instead, I straightened the frame. We don't erase love, I thought. We just learn when to stop offering it blindly. When I finally went to bed, the quiet didn't feel empty. It felt earned, like peace after a long, brutal storm. I lay there listening to the faint wind outside, the heartbeat of the house, steady and calm. Margaret once told me, "Kindness is strength, Aiden, but wisdom is knowing when to stop giving it to people who only take." Tonight, I finally understood, and for the first time in years, I slept not out of exhaustion, but out of freedom. The morning after, I slept soundly for the first time in months. Sunlight spilled across my bedroom floor, soft and gold against the cedar boards. The storm had passed inside and out. Outside, the snow had stopped falling, leaving the yard blank and unbroken, like a clean page waiting for something new to be written. I rose early, made coffee, and stood by the kitchen window watching steam curl upward. For years, I'd started my mornings with noise, radio chatter, phone notifications, the busy rhythm of other people's demands. Now, there was only quiet, and it was beautiful. Silence had once terrified me. Now it felt like peace wearing a familiar face. The house no longer felt haunted by Lily's hurried footsteps or Noah's restless pacing. It felt like mine again, not just a place to live, but a space that reflected who I'd become. For the first time, I didn't feel like a burden. I felt like a man in control of his own story. That afternoon, I went into the basement workshop. Dust covered the old drafting table where I used to design bridges, strong, steady things meant to endure time and weather. I ran my hand across the surface, feeling the grooves of my past. Maybe that was what this chapter of my life had been about, rebuilding the bridge between who I'd been and who I was now. I found an old photo tucked between blueprints, Margaret in her winter coat, standing by the Bow River. Snowflakes in her hair. She was laughing, her cheeks flushed with cold and joy. I smiled back at her image. "You were right," I murmured. "Kindness is strength." And I finally learned where to build the boundaries. Later that week, I booked a flight to Vancouver. Mason wanted me to visit, to meet his youngest daughter, a child I'd only seen through photographs and phone screens. I imagined holding her small hand, hearing her laughter ring through the air. Free of pretense or calculation, that thought alone filled me with a warmth I hadn't felt in years. Before I left, I did something symbolic. I stood by the fireplace, holding the Maple Ridge brochure Lily had left behind. I didn't burn it out of anger. I fed it to the flames slowly, watching the paper curl and vanish, its ashes lifting up the chimney like ghosts finally freed. As the fire crackled, I whispered a quiet prayer, not for revenge, not even for justice anymore, but for peace, for both of us. That evening, the sunset over Calgary painted the sky in shades of copper and violet. I sat on the porch with my coat wrapped tight, listening to the distant hum of the city, the sound of life continuing. The world hadn't changed much, but I had. When I closed my eyes, I didn't see betrayal anymore. I saw lessons hard, necessary lessons carved into the ice of winter, shaping the man I needed to become. Tomorrow, I would board that plane. I would walk into a new city, a new season, carrying nothing but what I chose to keep: memory, wisdom, and a heart that had learned to be quiet, but never small. And as the last light of day faded, I smiled to myself, whispering into the cold, some endings aren't losses. They're clearings, making room for everything still waiting to grow. When I landed in Vancouver, the air smelled different, wetter, greener, alive, after months of frozen silence. Even the rain felt like music. Each drop against the taxi window was its own note, part of a quiet symphony the city seemed to play just for me. Mason met me outside the terminal, his arms open wide, his smile a mirror of Margaret's warmth. For a moment, words weren't necessary. We just held on to each other, father and son, two men who had both lost and learned in their own ways. When he finally spoke, his voice trembled slightly. "Welcome home, Dad." I smiled. Feels like I'm finally getting there. His house sat on a quiet street lined with cherry trees just starting to bloom. The air carried a soft fragrance of promise. Inside, his wife had baked a pie, and their two children darted around the living room, all laughter and curiosity. "This is Grandpa Aiden," Mason said, his voice full of pride. The youngest, a girl no older than 4, ran up and took my hand. "You're the one who builds bridges," she said matter-of-factly, her small fingers wrapping around mine. I laughed, surprised. "I suppose I am. Daddy says bridges help people find each other again." She continued, "That's what you do, right?" Her innocence struck deeper than she could ever know. I knelt beside her and nodded. "That's exactly what I do." That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I stepped out onto Mason's back porch. The rain had stopped, leaving behind a damp freshness that clung to the air. In the distance, the city hummed softly. Cars, Fent music, life happening. It was strange how sound could hurt and heal in equal measure. 3 weeks of deafness had stripped the world bare, forcing me to listen to what couldn't be heard. Now, every noise felt like a heartbeat, not just mine, but the world's. I thought of Lily then. I didn't know where she was, and maybe I wouldn't for a long time, but bitterness had lost its edge. I wished her clarity, even if it came through pain. Some lesson I'd learned were carved only by silence. A soft wind moved through the garden, brushing against the new buds on the cherry trees. The petals trembled, almost as if whispering something. I closed my eyes and listened. For the first time since everything had fallen apart, I didn't hear anger or regret, only stillness, only peace. In that quiet, Margaret's voice came to me as clearly as the morning bells that used to ring from St. One. "Mary's down the street. You deserve to live without waiting for the next hurt. Aiden, you've already built enough bridges for others. It's time to walk across your own." I opened my eyes, tears blurring the horizon. But my chest felt light. Tomorrow, I'd take Mason's kids to the park, teach them how to skip stones, maybe tell them about their grandmother, the woman who taught me that love and strength were the same thing when you learned where to stand. For now, I just listened to the soft rhythm of dripping rain and distant laughter. Life, at last, was making music again. The morning sun filtered through the thin white curtains of Mason's guest room, carrying the sound of bird song and children's laughter from the yard. It had been years since I'd woken to those sounds, not the mechanical hum of a city, but the simple, living music of family. For a few seconds, he lay still, letting the moments soak into me like warmth after a long freeze. Downstairs, the smell of coffee and toast drifted through the air. I followed it to the kitchen, where Mason was flipping pancakes while his daughter balanced a bowl of strawberries. When she saw me, she waved enthusiastically. "Grandpa, come help." I smiled. "You don't need my help. You're already the chef." Her giggle filled the room, the kind of laughter that cleanses a house of ghosts. I sat at the table, watching Mason hum softly as he cooked. It was an ordinary scene, nothing cinematic or grand, but it was exactly what I'd fought for. A morning without pretense. A family that didn't measure love in money or convenience. After breakfast, we all walked to the park. The cherry blossoms were beginning to scatter in the breeze, floating through the air like pink snow. Mason's children ran ahead, chasing petals and shouting with delight. Watching them, I thought of Lily, of the small girl she once was, running barefoot through the same kind of spring light. For a long time, I'd blamed myself for what she became. I thought love meant giving without end, that generosity could heal selfishness. But standing there, under those drifting petals, I finally understood what Margaret had tried to teach me. Love without boundaries isn't love, it's surrender. Mason nudged my shoulder gently. "You look a million miles away." "Dad?" "Just thinking," I said, "about how easy it is to confuse kindness with weakness." He nodded slowly. "You didn't lose anything. You know, you just learned who really stood beside you. Maybe that's the only way to build something that lasts." I replied. "You test the bridge, see which beams hold, and which ones were never meant to carry weight." He smiled, the same steady, honest smile I used to see in the mirror years ago. "You built a good one, Dad. We're standing on it." As the afternoon sun stretched long across the park, I sat on a bench and closed my eyes. The wind carried the scent of blossoms and damp earth. I could hear children laughing, a distant dog barking, the world alive in every direction, and I realized I wasn't afraid of silence anymore. It had become my teacher. Life will always test you, I thought. It will take away your comfort, your certainties, and sometimes the people you love most. But in that loss, it leaves room for truth, for the kind of peace that doesn't need anyone else's permission. When we headed home, Mason's daughter reached for my hand again, her small fingers wrapped around mine with complete trust. "Grandpa," she said, looking up at me, "you build strong bridges." I smiled down at her. "The strongest ones," I said, "are built after they break." And as the sun dipped low over the horizon, I knew that was the real lesson, not about vengeance or even justice, but about rebuilding with wiser hands and a quieter heart. Because forgiveness, like any bridge, isn't built for the past. It's built to carry you forward. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left Thank you for watching.